Hey guys, Sebastian from Madrigal here. This is Traction Point. It's a game I'm developing as a solo indie developer. It's a vehicular puzzle exploration game, and I'm building it using a self-made engine and self-made tools. Now, quite often people ask me, why do I do that? Why don't I use one of the ready-made solutions? And that's a good question. Probably one that has more than one answer, if I'm being completely honest here. But a significant reason is the fact that I've been using this thing for quite some time, using it and working on it. I know what it's good at, I know what it's not that good at, and more than anything I know how to build things with it. But what I don't necessarily think people realize is just how long I've actually been working on this game engine. The game engine called Basis, which is powering Traction Point. Because the fact is, I've actually started working on Basis over 15 years ago. Actually, it's probably more like 16 years now, but let's say 15 to keep it simple. Of course, the engine hasn't always been this advanced. Especially now with Traction Point, which is supposed to be a full commercial release, I put significant effort into developing the engine lately. But it's still sort of the same engine, because I've just been adding and removing and modifying pieces over the years. And game development wisdom says that you shouldn't really be building an engine if you're not building a game at the same time. You should always have a reason to build technology. And that's something that I've always taken to heart. So during all these 16 years, I've always had a game that I've been working on at the same time as the engine has been built. And I haven't really been showing many of these games. A few of them have been released, sure. Their download links may have died. But a lot of them just have never really been publicly revealed to anyone. So I was thinking today we're gonna take a look at some of these prototypes. I'm gonna end with a little bit of special insight into the level creation in Traction Point as well. So over the holidays, I did a little digging in my archives and picked out the most interesting pieces of Basis history. Starting with the very first game that ever ran on Basis, called Tankaroo, or tentatively called Tankaroo. So this was supposed to be a tank combat game. Now this menu that you see here, this is something that you're gonna see a lot. In fact, we can even enter this menu in Traction Point today. This is a sort of a placeholder menu that is kind of bundled into the game engine itself, so that you don't have to do any UI if you just want to create a new empty game, so to speak. We can see here that this EXE was built on the 6th of February 2014. This game is actually significantly older than that. I think this build is probably from around 2012 or something like this. But this was the oldest build that I actually got running. And the thing with Basis is that I've tried ever since I started working on it, basically, to keep old game projects running on newer engine versions. So this is an example of that, where this very old game is running on a engine version that is probably a couple of years newer. I don't think I was working on this game at this point anymore in 2014, but it still runs the game. Today's engine doesn't run this game. It has evolved significantly since then. But still, this is what we're looking at. So the very first prototype, this was supposed to be a multiplayer game. And you can see this is how it looks. I don't think I have any, no gamepad support for this one. So you can drive around in this crudely modeled tank. We can see some uninterpolated physics shapes going on. We can shoot balls. And interestingly, the log here, which is actually the same log that we still have today, is happening. I don't know what is happening, but something is happening clearly. This is basically it. A very small piece of land. This is probably a height map. Some objects, and oh, now I now I managed to get flipped. I can still shoot things, but this was it. And I don't think there's really anything I can do now. Let's quickly just go back to the lobby here and launch it again. I tried actually running this multiple instances of this to see if the multiplayer is working. I think it probably is, but you can't currently run 2 instances of it on the same machine. It will just crash. So that's unfortunate. We do have a free camera. We can fly around here, and we can see that the level is actually pretty small. But we have a few things that we can already here see that this is basis. Like I said, we have this debug log here down on the right corner. If you press F12, you can enable and disable the development overlay. That is still the key that does it in today's version of the engine. F1 enables free camera, and you can fly around with WASD controls. So this is the very first prototype of a game that I ever made using Basis, circa 2012, I think. At this point, the engine had already been in development for, I don't know, 2-3 years or something like that. It was a pretty low intensity thing at the time. I was really learning how to do basically everything, so velocity was really slow. Okay, let's shut this down. Whoops. Right, we get an assertion failure. We can just shut it off. Let's see, I had some pictures here. So here we have a picture. I don't actually know the date of this. We can clearly see 2 of the tanks there. I have some crude debug menus. Here you can actually see, it says in-game. I didn't have an editor application then, but I actually did have an editor mode, and that is what you can see here now. This is now the mode is set to none, so this is essentially like selection mode. And we can add game objects just by clicking on this button. You would get some sort of menu, and then you could plonk down objects. And I thought this was kind of interesting. I think I probably had some bug here where like a timeout didn't trigger or something, so I just shot lots and lots of objects. Alright, but this is essentially what I have from the very, very first game prototype. Right. So the next one is called Orbit. And this is probably from around 2014, if I remember correctly. Again, we will be actually running a slightly newer version of the engine here from 2016. You can see the same menu, we just have this thing running in the background. It's essentially the same thing as before. Now, this was a game that was I was thinking about actually releasing as like a small free little game. So you have this space station here. You can launch your spaceship, and you can see the radius here around these planets and how their gravity affects your spaceship. And so the idea here was that it was supposed to pick up like some piece of cargo here, just represented by this yellow ball. Let's see if we can actually hit that. You bounce off the sides here, and then you need to take the cargo back to your space station. And it kind of works. All of these mechanics are implemented here in this prototype. The annoying thing is this thing that you can actually now see on the screen. Quite often, you would get a trajectory where you can't really do anything. You just have to sort of sit here and wait for the spaceship to actually do its thing. And then we can't launch it or control it in any way now. So we almost made it. We're supposed to bring the cargo back to the space station there, and we almost made it, but not quite. And so I realized that the game design needs some work, and so this never really got finished, this prototype. But it does show a completely different sort of game being built with this engine. So now we can bring the cargo back to the space station like this, and we get another one randomly placed here. I think the really interesting thing here is that you can calculate these trajectories, and they're quite well calculated according to what is actually going to happen. So I was planning to have power-ups that would let you calculate longer trajectories and all kinds of things, and of course bad things that you were never supposed to actually hit. Let's see if we can hit it with through a slingshot around this planet here. No. So you can see that trajectory didn't quite match actually what was happening there, probably due to some floating point inaccuracies or something. Anyway, this was the second prototype, at least the second prototype that I managed to get working. I only had time limit also for some reason. Let's see if we can shut this down. No, we can't. This assertion failed. All right. So the next game then. The next game was again supposed to be something completely different. Again, we have the placeholder menu here. Again, it was supposed to be multiplayer. We can just host a local LAN game here. So this was more than anything, this was a fluid simulation. It was kind of interesting actually. You can sort of see how buoyancy makes these things float here. Obviously, this is a pretty small piece of water. Let's see if we can actually resize this, make it a bit larger. And you could shoot balls here from this free camera, which was not supposed to be in the game. The game was supposed to be a twin stick shooter where you would sort of fight over some scraps left from a shipwreck, essentially. You had a bunch of floating things, so you were supposed to nudge your opponents off those floating things. So you have these pallets here, for example, that don't seem to quite have the buoyancy required to stay above the water, but I guess this is kind of how pallets float in real life. You have these crude characters here represented by a green and a red capsule and a nose. I think that's supposed to be a nose. As you can see, they don't have any physics or anything like that, so I never got very far with this, but it's kind of interesting from like a fluid simulation perspective, I guess. And you can see here that I had some system set up where you could actually specify like the point of the most buoyancy force in the local space of an object, and we actually managed to flip this thing. And this would probably also have been 2014, I think, if I remember correctly. And again, as you can see, it's a slightly newer build. In fact, this is the exact same engine binary used now to run this game as we did for the Orbit one. See if we can, again, we can shut it down cleanly. Oh well. The next game I wasn't actually able to get running, unfortunately. But I do have a somewhat interesting screenshot from it. So, King's Table was supposed to be the name of the game. This is, if I remember correctly, this was a version of Nefatafel, which is like a Viking chess sort of thing. It's a game that I built previously without using bases. And the idea was to make a multiplayer network version of that. The interesting thing about this picture here is that we can see the very first, I think this was basically the very first day I had the basis editor running. So you can see some of these things are all already in place, things that we still have in the editor of bases. We have the debug output panel down here, game object properties. It was called game objects back then, and now it's called level objects. But some of these views are already in place, and I think basically what I'm demonstrating here in this picture is just the fact that I've nested the running game in this WinForms application. And this would also have been 2014. All right. The next game I can release, and I will actually put a build of this online for you guys. So let's play it. And I'm gonna see if I can actually shut the. I need the mixer to actually turn off the volume for myself here. So this is called Jailbreak, and this is a game prototype that I've actually released online. Probably in, let's see, when is this built? So this is 21st of December 2016. I think this is probably actually accurate. The date is the date when I actually got this build done. And this is like a full playable prototype that should behave more or less like an actual game. You have physics going on here. The idea is that you are breaking out of a jail, unsurprisingly, and you have vision cones, as you can see from these guards here. Again, we can make this larger. It's really, really unforgiving. If you step into the vision cone, you immediately get spotted. So that's something that I probably would have had to make a little more forgiving by giving you some sort of build-up time or something. But the interesting thing with this is the fact that you can actually block off the vision of the guards using dynamic objects. The guards are really stupid in the sense that if they see a moving block, they don't care. They just can't see you, which means that you can do some reasonably hilarious things like boxing in these guys into a corner, and they don't know what hit them, essentially. So here you have a collection of smaller boxes. You can see that some of them, when that pile is tall enough, it actually blocks off the vision. And you can do something like this, and the guard is none the wiser about it. So, not very bright, are they? But still, this is a pretty fun little game, and it's actually surprisingly difficult. Although, if you know how to beat it, you can beat it quite easily. It has only one level, and you're supposed to get to the elevator that is over there. And to open the gate, you need to actually press that button there. You need to figure out how to do that. But that's kind of fun. This game has been released, as I said previously, already. But the download link had died, so I re-uploaded this onto the Madrigal Games website, and you can find the link in the description down below if you want to play it. Let's see, I had some images here that I found. So I think this is supposed to show sort of merging of aligned boxes into these sort of single blocks that are then raycast against to determine the visibility of these guys. Yeah, here we have the rays from someone who has like 360-degree vision. Something similar there, and here as well. And here's some debugging of the vision system clearly. So this was a pretty fun little thing to make, and actually something that I sort of finished in the sense that it is a playable finished thing rather than an obscure prototype. The next one is also playable and finished in some sense. This is actually a Ludum Dare game. Oh. It's called Land Ahoy. And it is sort of like it's riffing on the idea that the Earth is flat, and if you sail off the edge of the world, then you fall into some sort of abyss. And Christopher Columbus is trying to find a new world, which is over here. And you have these wind areas. So this is sort of like, looks a little bit like Orbit, the space game that we played earlier. But rather than having sort of circular forces, we have these wind areas here that affect your boat, and you can see when you have the next opportunity to actually launch yourself in some direction. And so you need to come here, but if you manage to reach the end here, you will actually fall off the earth, fall off the world. And so this is something that I created in, I think, 48 hours. Or was it maybe more than that? It's the only Ludum Dare game I've actually made, the only Ludum Dare I've taken part in, so I don't exactly remember. I do remember, however, that I spent like almost all the time just learning Blender and modeling this level here. That was a lot of fun. But yeah, the gameplay leaves something to be desired. And there's also no sound in this. And this would have been 2017, yeah, so 24th of April. So that would be that. All right, so what's next? All right, next we have Hyper. This I only have a video for you guys right now, but there is an entire video series about Hyper on the channel if you want to check it out. So this was an attempt to make a twin stick shooter against some sort of endless zombie horde. And the new thing with this is that I had just discovered Zig, or perhaps not just, but sometime before this I had discovered Zig, and I wanted to see if I can actually use bases while writing the gameplay code in Zig. So the video series about Hyper is all about how to do that and how to expose functionality from the game engine to Zig, so that we were able to build this twin stick shooter. And this was actually kind of fun. In this video it's clearly not done because the player doesn't die when one of those zombies hit them. But it was actually kind of fun to just like endlessly blast away at those guys. So it worked out pretty well. Check out the video series if you're interested. Alright, so now we're getting to 2018, and this is now when I started my first attempt at what eventually became Traction Point. So Traction Point is sort of on its second incarnation. First we have Slide, Project Slide. Project Slide actually started before Hyper. So this is before I have discovered Zig. And let's see when this is actually built. So this would be beginning of 2018. And you can see this is a car game. This is probably not using the PhysX vehicle SDK that I now use. Instead using the much simpler Bullet vehicle SDK. But yeah, it kind of works. I don't exactly know what this level here is, but probably just some sort of test to see how how the vehicles behave. And you can see them being kind of wonky. Oh, and here we have some nice volumetrics. So this was kind of like the very beginning of like, okay, so how does a vehicle-based game in a modern basis at the time look like? Of course, we had like Tankaroo the very beginning. But then I did a bunch of things that weren't vehicle games. So I had to kind of reimagine the whole driving. Let's jump forward a little bit, just a few months, and we can see a more fleshed out level here, still using the, quite frankly, a little wonky driving simulation here. I did quite a lot of work on the editor at this point, because now I wanted and needed to make proper levels. So, I mean, this looks kind of laughably bad, of course, but this really, creating this sort of thing in the level editor wasn't really possible before. You had to sort of author all of the assets outside and then just bring them into the editor and place them. And now here you could already place blocks and shape the terrain. In fact, I did quite a lot of work on the terrain editor. You can see me testing out some of that stuff. So you could paint terrain for the first time, raise and lower it, and all of that. Riveting. We have the first SIG code. This is kind of interesting. This is a video showing my very first test of implementing a component in Zig. So I have this magnetic crane thing which sort of pulls these dynamic objects to it, and then it explodes. And this was the very first SIG code. This would have been, 2020 is when the very first SIG code was actually executed within the context of Basis. So the first SIG code was actually implemented in Project Slide, and then I made Hyper, which was all about SIG later on. So we're going a little out of order here. All right, let's jump forward to the summer of 2019. Right, so here we're actually using Noes's GUI, the XAML-based third-party tool for the UI. I don't do that anymore. I have my own custom solution these days. But and I have some horrible AI-generated voices here. Here we can see that we actually already have physics implemented. Oh, we even have some AI cars, apparently. And the AI car drove into the sea. Right, so I'm actually hauling this cargo here now. You can't see any sort of connection between these two cars here, but it is clearly being hauled. This would be powered already by the physics vehicle SDK, and we can see that we have actually like a scripted mission going on here with some mission objectives shown there. Not sure how well those actually work. Well, yeah, quite a lot of work on the physics, the driving model, all of that, as well as things like scripting, triggers, all of that. Haven't really had. Well, I had maybe a trigger or two in Jailbreak, but nothing significant. All right, let's jump forward again. We have a version of Slide which is from August 2020. This one looks quite a bit different, actually. Let's see if I can mute this again here for myself. So here you can see that we have a much larger world. I'm doing terrain here very differently to how I actually do it nowadays. This was done with a third-party terrain sort of editor, and I was thinking of actually using that to generate the terrain for the level. But of course it doesn't really look all that all that nice. I mean, the shapes are all right, I guess. For some sense of all right, but the world doesn't really look like it kind of exists of distinct materials. It very much looks just like a painted height map of some kind. But we're doing larger worlds here, and I already have some meshes in here. Well, there's actually even some particle systems, twinkles in the sky, trees, this sort of thing. Oh, I fell into the river. Yeah, let's exit this. Now we're getting to a pretty interesting version of Slide. This is now using my own UI system with just like horrible placeholder buttons here. This is actually the final demo mission that Project Slide sort of where it ended before I decided to go in a slightly different direction. This is a fully scripted mission, if I remember correctly. You can see that the vehicle is pretty final, but the mission, the level is a white box level. And now we're kind of approaching the way that I design levels nowadays, where I have a height map terrain and then meshes, typically lots of meshes placed on it. And we can look at the final version of this level in just a bit. But this white box level should have more or less the final layout. Let's be a little careful here, because those guys will actually kill me if they spot me. And I think they already have. Oh no. So I died. Alright. So that would have been from 2021. We have the final version of Slide, the version that got as far as it ever did get before I realized that I don't quite have the manpower to make this game, and pivoted slightly to what Traction Point now is. But this is the same level, just decorated this time around, and of course improved in many other ways as well. Yeah, we can just skip this. And you can see that the layout is basically the same. And this uses a slightly different art style than Traction Point nowadays uses, as I'm sure you can tell. This has a more detailed look than Traction Point has, which goes for a more sort of flat shaded, almost cartoony look, which is perhaps the reason why Project Slide never really got past this one demo level. Well, that was one reason. It was just way too much work for one person to make the tech and this sort of content to build out a full game. And the combat took quite a lot of work to actually make fun. So I decided, let's make the same game, but let's strip out those two elements. Make the art style simpler. Let's remove the combat, at least for now, and make it a puzzle exploration game instead. But I still think this actually looks kind of nice, and in some ways this plays kind of nice as well. So maybe I'll come back to this incarnation someday. Right, and if we look at this, when this is built, well, this is actually built today, because this is the only other game besides Traction Point that actually runs on the current version of the engine. So while making Traction Point, I've actually kept Project Slide in a working condition so that I can actually use it as a sort of sanity test in some sense when building the game. But I think this build is from around probably early 2023. So it would be 2 years old at this point, roughly. And yeah, I did put a lot of work into just creating these environments, and I think they still look pretty nice. And I'm probably gonna use some of these things in Traction Point after a little bit of redesign. All right, so now we have actually arrived at the Traction Point that we know today. Or you would know if you have been following me on the channel, and if you haven't, then be sure to subscribe so that you get notified when I have a demo of Traction Point ready for you. It shouldn't be long now. And this is what we now have. You can see the art style is much simpler. The main reason for that is that it allows me to create more of it. And the gameplay also is more puzzle focused these days. Before we wrap up though, I was thinking we would actually take a look at how this level came together. So this is the demo level for the game, which I'm sure you have seen if you've followed me previously. If you haven't, then perhaps all the better, because then you'll be seeing some new stuff. But it looks like this, and it's not completely final. We have some things still that are white box. For example, this monorail running through the level here still isn't textured or necessarily even modeled. But most of these things are actually final, at least final for the demo. And so we have pretty much like a whole level to look at here. Now, while making this level, I took some pictures along the way. And so I figured we would just take a quick walk through how this level came to be. So this is roughly what it looked like today. And it started looking like this. Just a flat plane of terrain, nothing on it. And here you can see, this is the next step that I took a picture of. We can essentially already see the entire layout of the level. We have the lift station over here, which is essentially your objective for the demo. We have a cliff here of some description. We have the road that goes around this cliff, and you arrive from over here, from the big plane. And here's some elevated terrain as well. Jump forward a little bit more. We have this cliff here, which actually almost looks the same as it does currently. We've gained a wall here around the lift station, and we actually already have the monorail in place. And we have the ramp up to what eventually became the refinery here. Here we have a bit more cliffs in place. So here's a picture from, I think this is a picture that I took for one of the videos that I made. There is a speed modeling video for this monorail station here, if you want to have a look at how that came together. And here you can see a white box version of the refinery and the cliffs. A lot of these shapes are actually still there. And some of these buildings have gotten redesigned. And here we have essentially like the whole refinery in white box form done. But you can see the rest of the level is still very much as it was previously. And I think this is probably just another shot, the same thing. I'm trying out the fog here to see like what would actually work, how much fog we want. Right, so here we are modeling some of these natural and man-made shapes inside of the lift station. We have the road here, which actually still runs roughly like this through the lift station. Some of these supports coming together. And here we have, now it actually looks like some sort of concrete support. And a few more cliffs here. I think this one is actually pretty much already done at this point. It looks very much like the one we have today. So here we have the elevator station changing form. Now resembles more closely what we have today, but it's still not the final one. Starting to add some cliffs here, and we can see some more work here done on this terrain shape inside of the lift station. More cliffs. Some of these got completely redesigned later on, just sort of trying out different things to see what works and what doesn't. And here I have a paint over with some ideas of how this thing could actually sort of work. You can see that we have a pipeline coming off the refinery and running outside here. Here we have a level transition zone and a second terrain. I've marked here that we need a second terrain here because this space just ended here. Essentially all of these things came to be, and the cliffs go roughly like this, like these brown ones here. The crack or ravine as a blocker, that actually didn't happen. I was thinking I would have like a big crack in the ground that would prevent the player from going that way. That actually didn't happen. Instead, I put some cliffs here. Here we have the new smaller terrain that plugs into the greater one, larger one. And some cliffs here as well. Here we have the pipeline going out onto the big plane. And basically the same thing from another angle. We have some cliffs here now, so we are sort of like enclosing this entire level now with cliffs from all sides. And an aerial shot. So the elevator looks a bit more final now. We have some houses here that we can see. We have the gatehouse, the old version of the gatehouse, and we have this monorail station, which essentially still looks like this. It is kind of like the final piece there, which isn't modeled properly inside of the lift station. So now I've started adding some color to this to see what it would actually be. It was sort of unclear to me previously if this was supposed to be like a green grassy field, as it actually ended up being, or if it was supposed to be like a desert, like a very dry thing. I went with the grassy field in the end. You can see some detail painting here, but this is not detail painted. This is just painted with a single color, these roads. And here we have detail painting on these areas as well. And a lot more trees and things here. Because these cliffs here are also textured. These background ones are not. So here I am building the ruin for the warehouse ruin, which has sort of acted as a test bed for my GI, for my indirect lighting system. All right, and here we can see that we have color in most places, but essentially only this place here around these are grass object icons, so that you can see that this place has grass, but the rest of it doesn't have. And you can also see that this is the only place here around these guys that actually have any sort of detail painting. The rest of it is just basically single colored green and then some rough roads around it. And here is a shot where we are looking out onto the plain, and this area has been detail painted. These other ones are still white box. And shot towards the lift station. So here we can see that I've tried out light mapping this area. That's why it's so much brighter. Back then my light mapper was kind of wonky in the sense that like it made everything else darker except the place that you actually light mapped. In the new system you can just light map individual objects. It doesn't really affect the rest of the scene, but back then it did, and so we had this very clear border here between what was light mapped and what wasn't. Here we can see that we have basically the cliffs, the surrounding cliffs are more or less their final shape, but they just haven't been textured properly yet. And here we have more or less the final layout of the lift station. The entry here with the gatehouse and everything has changed drastically since then, but the rest of the stuff is more or less as we have it today. And here we have the AI paths laid out here on the roads. I'm not sure if this was actually happened right before this photo was taken. I think it was probably done before that, but you can see them along the roads anyway. We have grass in roughly half of the level. This one is still missing grass. And we actually have a lot of detail painting out here as well. These cliffs are textured until to that point, and then this is all white box, or not necessarily white box, but untextured, and these are also untextured. So some work here on the sort of window out onto the big plain, as I like to call it, which is kind of like behind our backs here at this point. Here we have the redesigned mother vehicle, first time in the level. This is not really anything with the level, but I found this was kind of an interesting picture to see. The mother vehicle used to look much more blocky and nondescript before this. So here we have some pipes untextured and then textured. And here we have, I think this is signaling that we have the whole ground detail painted at this point. You have grass everywhere, you have details painted on the ground everywhere. These cliffs here are still untextured, as well as the refinery cliffs, but the actual height map terrain is painted. And this is interesting. We have this picture, and this is essentially the refinery as it was when we left it some 20-30 pictures ago. Just block out, not really designed further in any way. And then about, I think 2 weeks later or something, I had completely redesigned this building here as well as this building here. We have detail painting everywhere. We have textures everywhere except this monorail station. This is still not light mapped, so we can see like the grass is being sort of wonky here in places, and the lighting looks very flat. We still not have light maps in this image. But the contrast to this other one is kind of stark. That's kind of nice. And here we have basically the final lift station. We have the actual elevator itself, as well as the power station here being modeled, still not textured. And here I am trying out light mapping the power station. I did quite a lot of bug fixes and optimization in the light mapper around this point, because I found that it just bugged out with many assets. And here we have almost all of the level light mapped. You have these objects here that are using their normal textures. They are not light mapped, but the rest of the area is. So I'm using a light map debug material here, which just shows the raw light map values without any other lighting. And here we have essentially the level as it is today. Fully light mapped As of a few days ago, we actually even have light probes in the level, something that is not visible in this shot. But have light probes as well. Here we can see the new gatehouse and all of that. And an ominous looking thing in the sky. And that's it. That's all I had for you today. I hope you enjoyed this little look into the history of the Basis game engine and how it has evolved over the years. If you're interested in following along with the development of Traction Point, if you're interested in trying out the demo when I have it ready for you, then be sure to subscribe, like the video, maybe even join the Discord if you're that way inclined, and have a great day.